Welcome, Terrilynn Dubreuil, TravelingArtista. This is basic drawing video number 3. Now before we did our three-dimensional objects in white and we worked with proportions and relationships of putting those objects in space. Today we are going to apply some of those basic shapes to actual objects. For instance, here's a shell. This is a nice simple shell. If I look at this, it basically to me looks like a sphere with a tiny little cone on the top. I'm not sure if you can see that, but by using white objects, we are not distracted by color. So I'm going to set this down and I'm going to start drawing. Now, within this, and your point of view this way is different than what I am seeing here, but basically it is a sphere. You can see that sphere right there. So I am going to start the sphere. Remember how you kind of draw in the air until you feel like your curves are coming right? And I have a number of little curves here, so I can always choose the best one. I notice that it tapers off this way, and that this is an angle kind of coming that way across the base. So I'm now doing those proportions. I'm kind of laying in how this object is going to fit in space. So here's my sphere. Make my light adjustments. It's going to fit within there. And then I have that tiny cone that's fitting on the surface, actually, yeah. And I'm going to add a little tick mark. It's down about 2/3 of the way here for that very tip. And then the cone kind of sits around that. And it's coming at me, yes. So keep looking at your object, because what you think it is in your brain is not necessarily what it is that you're looking at. We make all these assumptions, and it's good to look. It's wonderful, because then you're always learning and experiencing something new, and you're discovering. I love that sense of discovery. Back here, there's also a little cone sitting off the back, but we don't really see that, so I'll hint that in. And now we've got pretty much the shape of the shell. We finished some of those lines. This is where you could erase and fix, and you step back, always step back, take a look, compare to what you're looking at. Looks pretty good, but we want to move on because this is just instructional and you can practice on your own. So there is that, basically the shell there. So let's try another object, right? Our next object would be based on a cube. And remembering these lines are parallel in reality, so we want them heading off that way. I'm going to look at this object, flattened cube, a little cylinder on top. I start with the corner closest to me, right about there maybe. All right. And what's beside it. Notice I'm turning my vine charcoal on the side. I also look at how the angle of that base is heading back off into space from where I'm looking at it. Kind of goes off that way. And the same with the top, because remember, if they're parallel in reality, they have to be at least parallel on the paper. So now I have my basic cube that this is sitting within, parallel, parallel, parallel. Notice how I kind of combine, this is parallel to this, to this, this to this, to this, so I've kind of set it in there already. And then my cylinder is going to sit up on top here. Now within that cube, I can start defining it. I notice this is not actually straight, it slopes off a little bit, so I'm going to add that little slope. I do have this back corner over here for that, and it kind of disappears from here. And that's what I'm going to add in. My cylinder is sitting here on the top, not quite that big. Make adjustments, always making adjustments, double checking at what you're doing and making those adjustments. I'm looking down on it, so I see the cylinder is actually a circle, but it's sitting at this angle, so I can see that ellipse as it's going back. So I'm thinking about that. Sitting down here, down, down, start defining. If I'm looking, take a step back, define if I like what it does. Is there any adjustments? Yes, this does not go down quite far enough. It has to match that on that angle going back. So, coming down in, corner of the bottle. Again, I'm not going to make this perfect this morning, but just so you get the idea. Then you can choose the best lines that you've put in and get a feeling of how that's sitting in there. Don't you love that vine charcoal? It's just a nice little erase and it kind of goes away. You can adjust it very quickly. It's a great underdrawing tool too, whether you're doing pastel, acrylic, drawing, oil. Fine charcoal is a great way to start. Yeah, that's looking okay. Let's go on to the next object, something a little more complex, like a mortar and pestle. Borrowed this from a friend. Thank you very much, friend. Appreciate it. And now, again, it's kind of a cone, but it's shortened, right? It's truncated. So I'm going to start with that top. I'm looking down quite a bit on that. I want quite a bit of a curve there. That curve here. This curve is just, and I'm thinking through what's happening on the other side. Remember that X-ray vision we talked about? So thinking through those curves. If it were glass, you could tell, like you have glass objects, you can see through and see the curves that are happening on the other side. All right, very rough, stepping back. It's a little off kilter. This angle doesn't quite match that one. So I want to make those adjustments as soon as I can. The sooner you make the adjustments, the better. No amount of coloring or shading or anything else can correct bad drawing. You have to get the drawing correct right at the beginning. Otherwise, you're just building on top of that and it's not necessarily a good thing. All right, there's that curve, those little edges. This is the basic form of the object. Again, not perfect, and the pestle sitting in there is at this angle, so I kind of draw that in. This is a cylinder setting back in space, so that end is round. And what I'm looking at here, where I'm looking at this part coming at me, I'm looking at that curve kind of going away from me. So I'm going to ignore that back side. Even though I understand it's there, it's not going to show up in the drawing. Turn my hand so that becomes a natural line for me to make. You can turn the paper. There's nothing wrong with picking up your paper and just moving it around. And it's better also to be drawing standing at an easel, because then your paper, your surface is facing directly at you, perpendicular to your line of sight, where if it's lying down on a table, you already have a problem with your perspective because your paper's at an angle. Let's set that in there. All right, what about something organic? Something organic like a flower. Doo-doo. What do we do with this? All right, flowers, stay put for me. There we are. This is interesting. I'm going on this. Now, people want to kind of make that flat, and it's going to feel flat if you do it that way. But I want to think about this three-dimensionally. So if I look at it, the flower is kind of in a shape of a very flattened cone. So I've got this cone coming off. The base of the cone under here, where it comes down into the stem, right, is this way. But then you have the outside petals here. Notice how they go around in a circle. If you looked at it directly on, it would be a circle, just like the cone and the other aspects we've been talking about. So basically, it kind of comes around this way, a little fatter down here. It kind of falls down at an angle. Then these kind of come up a little higher, and then in that central area. And it's all very concentrated within this shape. And then the petals come off there. These kind of come at us. And by drawing and thinking about, there's none right there, fitting it within the cone, you can start thinking, this one's coming at me, this one's going off over this way, the other ones are going off over that way. So you're not just, you're thinking about how it fits within that contained shape or container shape. My mother always called them a container shape. She was a great watercolor teacher and a beautiful watercolor artist. And a lot of my terminology comes from her when she was teaching. And just talking about it around the house, it was a great environment. Our styles are quite different, and we've had some great discussions about different things. Notice also that you want to group the petals together. You don't want to make them all individual. Define a few of them, make them pop out, but not all of them. But keep them fitting into the shape of that cone. That one goes out that way, coming out of that center. Always keep it coming out of that center where it comes down into the middle. Again, this is not great. I would make adjustments. I just wanted to give you a quick introductory so you can practice this yourself. Now, if you want it to be perfect, take a photograph is my opinion. Photography is a wonderful tool, but I love it when the artist's own personal expression through their mark making comes out in their paintings and their drawings. Remember, some of these overlap and stuff. So there you are. If you look at the French Impressionists and other wonderful artists, you can tell, is it a Picasso? Is it a Monet? You know, you can tell by their style. Try to find your own style. I'm looking at these leaves now. This kind of fits into a cone almost as well. And then this leaf goes off to this point up here. Get rid of some of these lines. After that one heads out that way, coming out from that central axis, and this one comes down at us. So see how by fitting it within those cone shapes, you get a much more three-dimensional feel to your object. Okay, not a great flower, but you get the idea, I hope. That's the important thing. I have to do this very quickly because I'm limited to 15 minutes on these videos, but that's good for you. You get a quick introduction and then you can move on and do your own art. Now, what if you are drawing something in space, like trees or something? You can see this spruce tree is basically in a cone shape. And I have drawn the lines here. The bottom branches will come down at you. But as you get up to where your horizon is, which is where your eye level is, those conical lines become straighter. And then as you're looking up at it, you get that curve looking up. This willow tree is also kind of a cone, so think of it within that cone. There's the base of it coming down at you, these branches, they go up around, and then toward the top, it's above your line of vision. So what you're going to see there is that top outer curve. So here's that base, the lower branches, there's your top branches, and the rest kind of fit within there. And then that will let you know how they're falling as they come out of that central tree trunk. And then they go in and fit within those curves. These coming at you, some coming up at you, and the others are out. So I hope that gives you an idea. Always try to be thinking in these three-dimensional shapes. It'll make your art more effective. It'll make that illusion work better for you. Each tree has different shapes. I have this sheet. If you want this, let me know, because it's a good example of types of trees. Look at this little umbrella tree. It's definitely a conical shape with the branches and the trunks. But then up top, it also is a very flattened base of that cone. So I hope that gets you started and you can start practicing these for yourself. See you in the next video.